Shalom and welcome to the Remnant Radio Show, where we're living and learning a restoration lifestyle. Today is part 3 of a series that we're doing on the flu outbreak. We will not be using the particular words as we're trying to not be censored that much. We had actually started this out as a live stream, and I don't know if it's a coincidence or not, but as soon as we got to the word quarantine, our internet went out. So now this is a pre-record. I've been trying since January to warn people, not for hysteria purposes, but because when I saw this and the magnitude of it and what the repercussions can be, and I just didn't see how it could not be what it's becoming as it started out in the Orient. So what I'm going to share with you today is what I would call a Remnant Mama's remedy chest. These are the very basics. Now, this may vary for each person and for each region and where they live, because there are different herbs, especially from the herbal side, grown in different areas. And the more you get into this, the more you study, you'd actually learn what they were for your particular area that's indigenous. But when we deal with essential oils and or with herbs, and we have a global economy and commerce, we've been able to get these things that we normally would have had to have learned how to go out and grow ourselves or wildcraft or forage for. And so we become dependent to learn how to do all of these without having to do it from the base, like the old time, 16, 17, 1800s, when the women, most women, or they at least had one woman in the community or the village that knew how to do this. And they were called the medicine woman, but these were also many times burned at the stake and called witches, because there was a time when oils and distillation and things like that with plants and stuff was considered witchcraft in certain cultures, because they just didn't understand it. And so we're just going to go through. What I'm sharing with you is my experience since I was 17. So we're talking about 43, 44 years, having been raised as a military brat. My father was in the Air Force, and having become a victim of the social medicine system. And yes, I say social because that's exactly what the military doctor told me when I was 17, that I just had to accept it, that it was socialized medicine. And so I had to find answers and solutions. And I went through about 6, 7 to 10 years, slowly but surely learning more and more on how to come out of the medical system and learn how to take care of things for myself and my family. And so I've been healed of a lot of things. I've seen a lot of things happen. I've raised my 5 children plus 5 to 10 other children that we had that came in as our children's home, our children's ministry, our prison ministry. So a lot of what I say is from experience. I don't have just head knowledge, I have personal experience. First, we have to do a disclaimer to let you know that I am not a licensed physician or healthcare practitioner, even though I have gotten some certifications in aromatherapy and some health coaching. I am not part of what I call Pharaoh's system. And so anything I say is not meant to diagnose, prescribe, treat you. You all have to seek the Father, the Holy Spirit, and you have to take accountability for your health. And I have to say, you'll have to go see your health practitioner if you don't know how to take care of this yourself. One thing I will say that, as we have seen that has happened in China, with some of the films and the internet, people with cell phones, etc., have sent back, is this: with the outbreak as big as it is, say for instance in that particular country, in which I personally believe will be in this country. I hope not. I hope I'm wrong. But even just last night, Israel has 80,000 people in quarantine. The schools are shutting down. People are trying to get out of the country. Businesses are shutting down. So let me think. So my point here is there were people who were locked and barricaded in their homes. If they did not have food and herbs or oils to take care of their issues, they weren't getting treatment. Okay? If they wanted to go to the hospital or a clinic, and they made big makeshift clinics for these people, it still wasn't enough for 11 people. I think it was 11 million people in Wuhan. So it can become a problem. And if you pay any attention to even the mainstream news as of the last week, we have doctors who are begging for tests and the ability to test this virus. I personally believe and understand, I've been watching these cycles of things happening for over 30 years. The reason I paid so much more attention to this one is because it is worldwide. And I know you need to maybe go back and listen to a couple of other shows that we did, but I believe the viruses are manipulated in such a way that they are targeted and released in different countries, targeting different ethnicities. Okay? On one hand, the worst thing that can happen, and I know this may sound crude, but the worst thing that can happen is we die. We all have to die of something. Okay? So it really, on one hand, is not the flu itself, even if it's a plague, like it's turning out to be. That is not what concerns me, as much as not being prepared to feed your family and get the basic necessities that you need for quarantine and or the repercussions that may happen for not being able to work, not being able to travel, okay? It's a much bigger picture than just being sick. But what I'm going to focus on today is what I would have in my home for treating if we can't get to the hospital. I personally would not go to the hospital first, but a lot of you will because you don't have the skills, and fear is a motivating factor. However, keep in mind that when it comes to the masses, that may not be a choice. And again, that's why I behoove you to learn what you can right now. And the number one thing I cannot teach you, I cannot give to you, is you need to have a relationship with Elohim, Yeshua, and hear his voice and have a relationship through the Holy Spirit, the Ruach HaKodesh. Because there are many times for the last 30 years or plus, 40 years, that I had knowledge in my head for a certain herb or a certain oil, which back then I didn't really have a lot, but I had the Holy Spirit to direct me. A lot of things, what you know in your head for knowledge is going to be overridden by the Holy Spirit to tell you to do something else. And then you find out later the physical reason why he told you that. It doesn't matter. You just need to obey when he tells you. An example of that was I have an adopted son, my first son, and he was part of the prison ministry. And I knew there was something wrong with his breathing. And when I took him to the doctors and told him, they said there was nothing wrong with him at 3 months. But I knew better. And so for the next 18 months, I learned how to use herbs. And I found out at the end of 18 months, he actually had a hole in his heart. He should have always had pneumonia or so many other issues. But he didn't, because the Holy Spirit basically directed me on how to take care of him. And there were just things I knew. I knew I couldn't lay him down. I needed to set him up. And so you really need to develop that relationship, because if I hadn't have followed the instinct that the Holy Spirit was giving me, he wouldn't have come out and fared the way he did. And the doctors were actually shocked when they did the surgery as to how well he was doing. The first doctor wanted to put me in jail. And the second doctors who actually did the surgery at the Children's Hospital told me that whatever I'd been doing to keep doing it, because they'd never seen a baby with his condition in the shape that he was in. So they encouraged me to do that. So this is the main reason I want you to know these things. It became very personal to me when I watched a young lady who was very healthy at 20 years old. We watched her via Facebook have a heart attack instantly when she was taken to the ER for having problems breathing, which is one of the very first symptoms of this virus. or this particular strain. And remember, there's many other strains. And she had a heart attack, 20 years old, and her body was filling up with fluids. And so I watched that, and as I watched that, because of what I've seen and what I know in the last decades of my life, I knew this was no regular kind of virus. Also, we did a radio show. If you go to remnantremedy.com, go to radio articles. I did a show in 2017 covering the solar eclipse. And there is something about different times of the year, solar eclipse. I won't go into all that. You can do that kind of research. But the University of Montana released a bacteria balloon. I believe it was enhanced with the research that I've done since, that they did it during that particular time because they knew that the atmospheric conditions were best to disseminate these bacteria that they were testing on. That was like August, September when that solar eclipse was. By October, in particular, because I travel a lot, I see a lot more things than other people do. Northwest Montana had an outbreak. And my grandchildren, for instance, were very, very sick. And they just couldn't get over it from October to February. So when I went up there in February to see them for spring break, within 24 hours, me and my second son were very sick, and we did not move from a couch for 2 weeks. It took another 8 weeks to get well for me. My son went through profuse bleeding of the nose. I have had viral meningitis, so I know what it's like to be very sick. And this was nothing like anything I had ever had. And so I won't go into describing all of that, but it was very unusual. And all the different herbs and oils that I had used before weren't really doing much. And I started learning to use other things that I was there. And praise Father, I had went with a trunk full of stuff to juice, and I had carried my medicine cabinet because I was determined while I was there to get my grandchildren well and over it. And the week that I came down sick, and my son, we were so sick I could not talk. And when he was bleeding so much, I couldn't talk on the phone. I couldn't call an ambulance. If they came, I couldn't talk, couldn't do anything. It took everything just to breathe. And so after 2 weeks, I thought we probably wasn't going to make it, but we got well enough to get in a car to drive back home. And I won't go through that much more except to say it was a wake-up call, a big wake-up call. So then flash forward to we watched this thing that happens with this young lady on the internet and Facebook. And by the end of the week, the following week, I have a brother-in-law who, after a couple of days, got the flu. And I want to say it's about 3 days. And he talked to his son like Thursday night. He had come down with the flu, and he said it was a little hard to breathe. And by morning, he was passed away. So it's a very personal thing to me. And when I went to Florida to the funeral, I went to see friends because I have friends there that I've known for 30 plus years. I couldn't see a couple of my friends because they were too sick. There are people in the area who have respiratory issues, and one I did get to see. She was well enough to see me, but she had been sick for over 2 months, and they had just now told her she had walking pneumonia. What I realized was, with it being going around the country, is this: they were not testing. And this just came out in the news in the last week or two, not just the off-regular news, but the regular news. Doctors and ERs are begging for testing. We have someone in Washington that just came out a report yesterday that he had to leave work because, anytime you get a flu or anything now, they're wanting to send you home. And they sent him home, told him he had to be tested. Well, he called the clinic or the hospital, wherever it was he had to go. They told him to show up. They made him wait in the car. They would not let him come in. They went out to him, did the swab for the test, but they did not test for this virus that's the outbreak. They only tested for strep throat and I think it was pneumonia. The point is, they are not testing. So when we read the numbers for the United States of America, we are not getting the numbers correct because we are not being tested. The vast majority is not being tested. There was a report that went out that only 30,000 tests did go out, but they were giving false negative reports. So overall in this country, I believe they have allowed it to be very well set into the communities, especially the big metropolitan areas, and it's out there. So, do I want you to be scared? No, I want you to be prepared. And you will panic if you're not prepared, if you don't have a plan, and if you don't have the Ruach. Nobody wants to see their family suffer, but if you're prepared, and you need to be prepared in your spirit first, you know, when our number's up, our number's up. But if we can help take care of our families, have some skills, some tools, then I think we won't have as much fear. And if we think about it worldwide, whenever there is something, go through the scriptures, whether it was the Exodus, the pre-Exodus, with Moses, all throughout scripture, Hanukkah, Purim, whenever it looks very bleak, we have to be able to see or think about how Father's ways are not our ways. His thoughts are much higher. There's a much bigger picture. Me personally, I believe the big picture is going to usher in whatever's needed worldwide to prepare the believers for the time of the return of the Mashiach. And we are at the beginning of the birth pains for sure, and probably have been in for some time. So the most important thing that I've been trying to tell people for 30 years and thinking it's just calling wolf is you have to prepare your spirit. The more you're prepared and the more your relationship with the Lord is good, the more this is going to be easy to endure. So I'm coming from a baby boomer background. I'm at the very end of the baby boomers, so I was kind of a hippie wannabe, but too goody two shoes. So it was more on the scholarly track. I actually wanted to go to school to be a psychiatrist and decided I had too many problems telling anybody else what to do. So I changed it to wanting to be a doctor, a chiropractor actually, and then things happened in my life, and so I never ended up that, which, you know. So this is where I'm coming from. I'm coming from the mentality of a grandmother and a mother and someone who's just wanting the artisan skills of how to take care of my family like our great-great-grandmothers used to do throughout history. So let's start with, first of all, if you get the chance, there's more detail and not as rushed because, you know, it's just in general about colds, flus, mold. And if you go to remnantremedy.com or go to our YouTube channel, there's an article, there's a video called Colds, Flus, Respiratory Mold, and How to Anoint a Loved One. And don't let the how to anoint the loved one fool you. It's something you need to know. It's a term that we would use from a biblical point of view of what we would do to someone when they're sick. And we'll go over that a little bit today. Okay, first of all, I want to talk about some herbs that I would definitely have in my cabinet. And one of the first ones is one called mullein. Now, if you're in Northwest Montana, I think Oregon, Idaho, it's kind of a hairy looking thing when it's pulsed out and dried. When you see it as a plant, it can get really tall. It has little flowers. Sometimes you'll see mullein in a tincture with oil because it's used. The flowers in particular, I believe, are used for bringing out mucus. This is why you want this. This is something just good to do regularly, actually. But if you have respiratory issues, lymphatic issues, you're going to want this. And we're going to make a tea out of it. And so it's if you see it has really big, kind of fuzzy looking leaves, and it's called, some people call it Indian toilet paper. Now, you can harvest it. I won't go into, I buy mostly, I used to harvest it, but I don't anymore because I don't live there. Here's the thing, if you're going to harvest it in your area, if it's growing in your area, do not pick it up along the side of the roads. Because even though it's a really good medicinal plant, most medicinal plants, at least the ones I know of in the Northwest, are considered toxic weeds by the government. So they spray them to kill them. So if you're getting them alongside the roads, they're going to have pesticides on them, okay? But I like to order my herbs in bulk because if you get just a tea bag, you don't know if their tea bags have been irrigated. They're going to cost a whole lot more money, and sometimes for the price of 1 or 2 little boxes of tea bags, you can get a whole pound of the herbs. And Star West Botanicals, Frontier Herbs are 2 of the major ones. You can order them through azure.com, or Amazon, wherever you get them. But a lot of these things, the prices have been going up and they may not be able to be available. This bag that I'm showing you here is rose hips. Okay, I use this bag because I've tried to break it out here so we wouldn't have all these big bags out. But let's go back to mullein. So mullein, what you want to do with mullein is make a tea with it. You can also make a tincture with it. Again, you could take some, put it in a jar, fill your jar up, cover it with olive oil, put your lid on and let it soak. And I'm not going to go into the details, but a book that is really good is called Making Plant Medicine by Rico Sheck, I think is how you say his name. You can go to horizonherbs.com. I think I have lots and lots of books, but I find this one to be the most helpful when it comes to making my own tinctures. Tincture usually means it's been extracted into alcohol. In some states, you can't get this. I bet right now, certain times of the year, you can't even get this. We use the Everclear. It's 190% proof, okay? A tincture is made with alcohol. A glycerite, although we do call it a tincture a lot of times, is really truly made with glycerin. There's a company called Trilite Herbs. They've been around for a long time. I used to use them a long time ago. If I was making I'm sorry, I'm going to switch on here for a minute. If I was using echinacea, okay, to me, Dr. Schultz's herbdoc.com is the best echinacea on the market, but you can always tincture it yourself. It'd be less expensive. You'd have to buy the alcohol and do it, but you could do it some with tincture. You could do some with tea, okay? The point about the glycerin that Trilite sells is this. They have a product called Scout Out. Scout Out is a mixture of probably, I believe it has echinacea in it. I think it might also have thyme, but my main thing about it was it had echinacea and golden seal. This other herb here is golden seal. Golden seal has gone up to over $100 a pound since it started years ago. It might have come down. There might be some more commercial growers. And for those of you, if you want to smell those, you can take these and smell them, but later. But the reason you have them is you're going to make teas with them. So there's the first thing. If I got somebody sick, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to make them some mullein tea. Okay? I'm a mother. I usually have lots of children and/or I don't have time. So I don't like to mess with a simple little tea bag. You can do this, but I don't. So I usually, you can get those little tea droppers where you put the little leaf thing, but I have this big one. And so what I would do is I would take at least a tablespoon of my echinacea, a tablespoon of my golden seal, and a tablespoon of mullein. Now keep in mind, you could do mullein just by itself. It's very mild. It's good cold. It's good warm. When I do it by itself, and we've got a lot of respiratory, I like to add peppermint or spearmint tea with it. If you can get peppermint or spearmint in the leaves with it, that's great. If you don't, you want to go the fast route, you want to use an essential oil. Here's what you got to know about essential oils when you take them internally. If you're going to put them in your tea, you have to put them in with some coconut oil or oil. And if you have respiratory issues and you've got this really bad cold and bronchitis and or whatever's going on, you might want to put your coconut oil in whatever your tea is anyway, just because it's soothing. And when I was really sick a couple of years ago, I had never really used coconut oil for anything, but we didn't eat for 2 weeks. So we had broth, we had herbal teas, and we had that coconut oil going all the time on our face because our faces were so raw and in the throat. And so you have to use essential oils with a carrier oil, preferably olive oil or coconut oil if you're going to take it internally. Do not believe you can just take it internally and or be applying this stuff on your skin freely most of the time, especially when we're dealing with colds and flus, because it will burn your skin. It will burn your digestive tract. So back to the tea, whether you have all three, combination, mullein, I just put them in here. I let it simmer for about 20 minutes. I don't really want to bring it to a boil. Another thing you can add to it is rosehip. Rosehip is another thing that you can harvest around Sukkot time, fall in the Northwest. Or you can just buy them and you can boil them like this. Now, when you're dealing with seeds, something like this, you usually want to boil, but I don't want to boil my tea. I want to do everything at once. This is just me. I'm saying there's other kinds of ways to do it, more detailed, but I take it and I pulse it. So when I get done pulsing it, it's like this, and I just mix it with my tea. I'll put that in here too. So now I'm getting my vitamin C this way. And if I want to, I can add peppermint, whatever. If you feel that the echinacea or the golden seal is too harsh, especially when you're dealing with children and young people, or people who just don't want the harsh stuff, even though it's much stronger, just stick with the mullein and stick with the peppermint and the vitamin C, the rose hips, okay? And then you can use the essential oils externally for the stronger antiviral, antibiotic kind of stuff. So what I do is I just put it in here for 20 minutes. I put a lid on it. I let it basically infuse for 20 minutes. Then I take it out. I pour it in a quart jar. That's why another reason why I do so much. I fill it with, if you can use distilled water, that's awesome because the distilled water will pull the properties out more. But then what I do is I will pour off just enough what I want, and I will, so let's just say I just put this in the pot. Well, then I can put it in a cup, strain some off into my cup, and I might only put about that much because it's really concentrated and strong. And then I'll add more water, maybe even cooler water, because now I can also serve it immediately to whoever's sick. But I'll pour even with the herbs in here and then put it in the fridge. And then I'll just pour off of that. And I'll let that sit in the fridge up to 3 days. And I can keep adding water because I can still be getting some properties out of this. I can make a new batch every day and just rotate it. But I can, if it's cold in the fridge, I can pull it out, strain it out, and put a little bit of hot water on it. Okay? So mullein pulls your lymphatics. In the herbalist world, and a lot of my original training was with Dr. Christopher's training. He teaches what we call you to be a vitalist. To, instead of just fighting herbs, of course, you eat proper foods, you build up your immune system. But instead of stopping your nose when you're running, You help it facilitate to get it out, because what's happening is your body was designed to create this mucus as protection against the pathogen or whatever it is that's in there. And it's building that up to get rid of it. That's why your nose starts running. So instead of stopping it up and keeping that in the body, we are going to start making sure the body is purging out what it needs. And one of the hardest things to purge out is the lymphatics. If you can get this book, it is sold still. The newer the version, this book has held value. This book alone is probably worth over $100. And this is an old book. The older the copy you can get, I suggest you get, because what has happened through the years is they keep making rules that things are illegal or people go to jail, etc. And so to be more politically correct and not to cause so many problems, some of the wording and recipes will change. But this isn't the oldest version, but it's pretty old. And it's called The School of Natural Healing, Dr. John Christopher. And his son, I believe, is still alive, and they do sell herbs. But this would be what we would call the Herbal Bible. This version I have is 1976. Lots of information. I like this one because it's going to tell me if I want to make a tincture or I want to extract echinacea, is it stronger, more potent if I have alcohol tincture or if I have a glycerin tincture? But why would I want a glycerin tincture? Scout sells it with glycerin. Why? Because children like the sweetness. Glycerin's sweet. Now, in my household, I started out with that, but I learned that it's much stronger, and I was taking the alcohol base. Of course, other people have issues about the alcohol base, but I want something strong. The more bitter the echinacea is, the stronger it is. I didn't want to be messing around with having to spin and keep buying the glycerin, even though I could make it too. But my children learned that if they want to get well, they don't care what it tastes like. You know, they just come and go, give it to me. Because they know within a day or two, most of the time, they're going to get on with whatever they do, you know, play, whatever. So, but if you're just starting out, you might really want to go that glycerin route, especially with Echinacea Golden Seal. Warning, warning, warning. If you are pregnant, do not use Golden Seal. It will cause contractions, and you could miscarry. Now, why do we see a lot of formulas with Golden Seal and Echinacea? Generally speaking, the way I was taught was Echinacea is better for antibacterial, Golden Seal is better for antiviral. An old trick that we used to use, usually the umbilical cord would be gone within 1 to 3 days. Although we have essential oils now, we would use the Olive Care, ALEF care for that. But back in the days when we had cuts, wounds, umbilical cords, we would use Oregon grape with Golden Seal, and we would just dust it on the umbilical cord or a wound. If I had a big gaping wound, that's what I would do. I have an article on Livingstone's Tabernacle, on Olive Care, on Helichrysum Italicum, and I have stories there on how we would use that mixed with essential oils to fill in the wounds and be antibacterial, antiviral. Wound care is a whole another category. And if I had an open wound, I would use our Olive Care blend. But a lot of times you don't ever want to use an oil. It depends on your use, whether you want to use it neat. What neat means undiluted with a carrier oil. If I'm bleeding, if I have a burn, if I have an open wound, there are certain oils you don't want to use, but there are oils you can use, and Helichrysum Italicum is number one. A lot of people like lavender, but I think the combination with the Helichrysum takes away the pain. I've seen burns and blisters disappear anywhere in 20 minutes to overnight. Just big blistered burns. It's just almost like miracle-like. That's why it's expensive, but it's worth it. Okay, we've used them instead of stitches many, many times. So that's a little off, but cypress essential oil is really good for mucus too. So we'll get into the oils, but that's so what I do is I have this idea that I'm going to attack a flu, a virus, strep throat, whatever it is, I'm going to attack inside and outside. That's why we go herbs. Primarily, herbs are for internal, essential oils are external. Again, this is all generalities, but that's pretty much the basis of that. So I want you to know, number one, mullein tea. If you want your children to love it, get you some honey, some peppermint tea, or peppermint oil. But if you use the peppermint oil, always put the peppermint oil in your coconut oil first, then put it in your hot tea or warm tea. And of course, if your tea cools down, your coconut oil is going to get a little thick. If you're so sick you can't eat or you don't want to eat, I won't go into it, but fasting is really good for the body. But the main thing is to have fluids. And when you have fluids with bone broth, coconut oil, you're helping the brain, you're helping the body. You're also coating the stomach with that bone broth or that coconut oil. And then they have their own properties. So we won't go into all those details. So if it was me, I would make sure that I had mullein, echinacea, whether you buy it in tincture form, tea form. I like to have it both. I like to attack whatever I'm doing with the strong tincture, but I also like to have the tea so that we're constantly drinking something antiviral, antibacterial, and with the honey, etc. So mullein, echinacea, golden seal if you can get it. Lots of vitamin C. If you can get liposomal vitamin C, that's amazing. That's great. If you can get, they say, the people I work with right now, that vitamin C sourced from cassava is best because a lot of the vitamin C that's sourced is not really good quality and may even have some issues with it. Dr. Schultz, herbdoc.com, has a good, very good vitamin C. But another more economical way to get it, to have a constant, easy flow of it coming into the body is through your rosehip tea. Now let's talk about, so we want the mucus moving. We want that to just be draining and pulling. If you're a female and you don't have a cold and you're taking mullein tea, you may even notice you're going to get some vaginal discharge because you might not think there's anything going on, but if there is, it'll start draining. You might see that pick up a little bit. And then, of course, when you're dealing with that, you can take your essential oils like cypress, or we have a blend called Breathe Free, and you would mix it with a carrier. And the first thing I would do, I personally like fractionated coconut oil when I'm applying it to people. Not that I won't use the heavy coconut oil, the more unrefined kind. I like to have both. But if I'm going to mix an oil, I like to use fractionated coconut oil instead of olive oil because it doesn't stain as easily. It washes out better. And it has an unlimited shelf life. So if I got a remedy chest and I want something long term, I'm going to have fractionated coconut oil or FCO. Today they also call it MCT oil, and I won't go into it, but I don't think personally MCT oil a lot is taken internally is good, but they are selling it now for internal use. But that's what I would use. So if I was, I'm going to guess I'm going to use a teaspoon to 3 tablespoons. You can't even see it because it's so clear, of my carrier oil to anoint or to rub down my sick person. And we'll go into that in a few minutes with the demo. Because usually, whenever I have done this over the years, when somebody's so sick, especially husbands or people who don't usually come down, or kids, when kids stop playing, they're pretty sick. You watch how lethargic they are, etc. Is usually when we anoint them and we use these essential oils that are antiviral, antibacterial, also help with the fever, etc. Usually within 1 to 2 times, they're up and ready the next day. If it goes 2 to 3 days, they probably have a really high fever, and I know they're fighting some kind of bacteria usually. I've never gone past 3 days of doing it at least twice a day, the way we do it. So we have seen, in fact, last August I saw a baby use our Spice Defense with the carrier oil, put it around the baby's neck and feet, and within 20 minutes or so, her fever was down. So it's very powerful to learn how to anoint someone with essential oils. So, think about these for your, you can make tinctures, you can make infusions. This here is mullein. I filled it up with mullein, and then I put the olive oil on it. Now, remember, olive oil or any of your good lipid oils that you would eat is going to help extract those properties, but it's also not going to last forever because it goes rancid. That's why we use the fractionated coconut oil for long term. But what you can do with this is you strain it and you can use it with the dropper and put it in the ears for ear infection. And I suggest you research how to do that. I mean, it's really not hard, but it is something. Mullein, you can just go buy it at the health food store. It costs more, but you can do it that way. You can just buy the little bottle of it. It's mullein. A lot of times they'll put garlic oil in it. But again, you have to have a good high ratio of your carrier oil or you're going to be burning because garlic can burn too, okay? I have never tried it until recently, but I thought I'd try it this time. I took garlic cloves, peeled them, put them in here, and covered them with raw honey. Now, remember, it has to be raw honey, not the honey in the grocery store. It needs to be local, raw honey, because a lot of the honeys in the store are mixed with high fructose corn syrup, and they don't tell you, or adulterated some way. Also, a lot of people, see, we're so trained and removed from the farms that we don't know what really good stuff is. This is a honey that is very crystallized, okay? It's not even going to come out, right? If your honey crystallizes pretty quick, or crystallizes, you know it's really good honey, okay, because it has not been overheated, okay? And that also means it has more antibacterial properties, etc. So with this, what we do, or what I've been doing is, I think long term, this would be awesome to take and crush those garlics even finer and put them on when you're baking. Okay, so you have infused honey with the garlic, and then you have the garlic sweetened with the honey. But for being sick and preventative reasons, I've just been taking a clove or two a day. Old timers from Europe that came to this country many times, just every day would take several cloves. And that is an old herbalist trick. Most people don't like it. They think it's too hot. It tastes too bad, but who cares? It's great for the immune system. Okay. And then the same thing with mullein. Just as a side note, so I don't particularly like this because it gets hard and really sticky. It would be better maybe if I grated it. But I bought a pound of turmeric. And it gets really sticky and pasty, but I make a chai tea with this. And I also use the oil when cooking. Or I'll just dig down in there and get the spoon out of that with a little bit of olive oil and put it in my broth. Why pay extra for the bone broth with turmeric when I can get it by the pound and make it up myself? I even got, I even took some hyssop that I got from Israel, bulk hyssop, and I infused it in olive oil and then I strained it off. Again, goes on your salad oil, you can use it. Hyssop essential oil, let me talk about hyssop essential oil, preferably hyssop decumbens. There's officinalis, but decumbens is considered more safe. But if I had a dry choking cough, or if I just had a choking cough, a drop of hyssop decumbens with coconut oil or frankincense, I would put in my throat with the coconut oil and let it sit there as long as I could. First of all, it's going to coat the throat, but it's also going to help with the spasm of the cough. If I had a sore throat, and if a lot of these things, you hit them as soon as they come on, don't mess around. If a sore throat starts up, we take 1 to 2 drops of oregano oil, oregano essential oil, which is extremely hot, okay? And I'm gonna put it with a teaspoon of coconut oil or olive oil. And I'm gonna swish it around my mouth and let it sit on the back of my throat as much as possible. You could oil pull with it. If you oil pull with it, you spit it out. If you don't, you swallow it, you got your natural antibiotic. Usually, depending on how bad that throat is, if it could be strep or whatever, you have to repeat it. Same thing with the echinacea. If we're super sick and it's going around and I don't want to mess around, I don't even want to mess around till people get super sick, I'm taking those tincture dropperfuls every 1 to 2 to 4 hours, okay? Because if you don't, then it gets all backed up and then your ears start getting infection. I just got a wonderful letter from a young lady that I knew when she was younger, who's now a young mom. And she was begging to know how to get her tonsils taken out. And she had posted it on Facebook. And because I personally knew her, because I don't usually respond because everybody has their health advice, but I messaged her and said, why do you want to do that? You don't have the money to get the tonsils taken out. You get them taken out. You now have lost the barrier, fortress of immune system that bacteria and other things would have to go through. You're going to remove a part of your body that does a job. And what the medical field does is say, well, if it's always getting sick, then we need to take it out. No, if it's always getting sick, then you need to change your lifestyle. You need to change what you eat. You change something so that your tonsils don't always have to do the job they were created for. So long story short, I told her what oils to get. I told her what herbs to get. I told her how to apply them. And when she wrote me this letter and told me how thankful she was because now they had the money for the down payment for their house instead of using it for the surgery. And within 2 weeks, 2 days, she was well. And we're going to go through that where the oils go around. We don't mess around. We're going to fight it inside with the herbs, and we're going to fight with oils, maybe inside, but mostly outside. Okay, if we're talking about brands, when it comes to herbs, I personally like Frontier Herbs and Star West. I know there's another company out there that a lot of people really promote, but I also know they're very, very new agey. Not to say these other two might not be, but I happen to know the other one is a lot. But if you do end up, because most of them are out there, pray over them. You know, Father can provide, and we have the power to override that. Some products that are really good, you're not going to find in a health food store, and you're not going to find on Amazon. You can find a couple of Dr. Schultz's products on Amazon, and one of them is his echinacea. He has an echinacea, which is very strong and good. I have never used it, but in the recent years, he now has a children's version also. I've just never used it. I always use Trilite Herbs, and I think it's trilitehealth.com. And I would particularly look at their Scout Out product, which is the one I was talking about earlier. And you might want to look at their cough syrups. I think they have an elderberry thyme one, maybe. I just haven't ordered from them in so long. But those would be probably the main ones as far as herbs go. Azure.com are believers, and they run an awesome co-op, and they deliver to most states. I think they've really grown, and they have a program for, I think now they have rewards programs, et cetera, but go to azure.com, and then you have to find the local drop-off for your area for when they come in. They're a business, family business, farm, and co-op. And that's azure.com. And I would highly recommend anything that you can do to support businesses and families and ministries like that. However, we are in a time frame right now that just to get any of this is it's more important to have it than not to have it. Okay. one thing I wanted to share is, first of all, make sure you have a good thermometer. I know back in the old days, we always used the glass thermometers. I know those are kind of difficult for some people, but you can get a thermometer for, I don't know, about $12 and get a digital one. And you can order, if you can get them, you can order these sleeves that you get, and then they can be reusable. And you just put it in your mouth like that, and then that's a quick way to do the thermometer. If you got a glass thermometer, on infants, we usually lubricate them. We put them in the rectum. We have to hold it. Make sure you hold it, because an infant's hiney can suck that thermometer in. Okay? So make sure you hold it. And always remember to add at least, no, I'm sorry, that's under the arms. But yeah, on a baby or infant, if they're moving or whatever, you can do a rectal. Make sure you know how to do that properly. And if you're going to do it just under the arm with a glass thermometer, you always make sure you're careful about it, shake it down, etc., so that you don't have the mercury release. But you usually have to add, I think it's 1 degree temperature to it, because it's warmer. You're actually warmer than whatever's just under the arm usually. So that would be important. The Chinese clinical protocol that I was studying, the very first 2 things they did with the people was they took their temperature and they took their oxygen saturation rate. And you can get these for, I want to say they're like, if they haven't gone out, and if you can still get them, these are on Amazon. It's called an oximeter. And you just put it on your finger like that. And within we'll see how long it takes. It'll start taking my pulse, and it will also rate my oxygen. And my rate is now 81, my pulse rate, and my oxygen's 99. And what they did was, if your temperature was 99.15 or higher, and your oxygen rate was 93% or lower, they immediately then began the antiviral protocol on you. Now remember, antibiotics, anti meaning against, bio meaning living, antibiotics do not kill viruses. Viruses are considered non-living. I personally consider them, in a sense, demonic. They need a host. They have to host upon something. Okay, they mutate. There's all kinds of weird things about viruses. So taking antibiotics or demanding antibiotics is not going to serve your virus to get rid of it. When you have meningitis, for instance, if you have bacterial meningitis, we can take something to fight that bacteria. But I had viral meningitis, and really, besides keeping fluids down me, there's not a whole lot you can do, maybe control the temperature if it's too high. And of course, I had a massive spinal headache, and I literally crawled on the floor because any sound, any movement, anything just was, and the way I got treatment was I only crawled on the floor because I couldn't stand up. And that was after 2 doctors, an emergency room, that they ignored me. So, and then finally, they gave me a spinal tap and said, oh, well, you got a reason to be sick. Okay. So this is a tool. We put this in our newsletter. It's an ionic air cleaner. You just wear it, and you turn it on, and it comes with a little charger. Now, there's a thing about whether it's positive or negative ions that can attack mold and viruses and bacteria. And so if you contact me at remnantremedy.com, and you probably really need to email me at Nitza, Nitza, at remnantremedy.net. And we have a newsletter where we put this out, and you could get 20% off through someone who's a mold specialist, because a lot of people with mold problems wear these. But I've been wearing these because I knew I couldn't afford and get enough masks, and I wanted to have the environment around me when I was out. So I wear this whenever I go out now. If I had sick people in the house, I might also want to wear it. The other thing you can do is get you a diffuser like this made out of clay. We have a few left at Remnant Remedy. on our Pure Shimmin shop, but this is a clay diffuser. And so we just put like our Breathe Free on it, put a couple of drops on there and just wear it like that and smell it when I travel or when someone's sick. So those are just some, so I thought with this particular virus, it would be very nice to know right away whether or not the oxygen rate is high enough and how concerned I have to be. I mean, I'd probably treat them the same regardless, but if I knew, because, this, from what I understand, this particular outbreak doesn't always start with, a normal runny nose. It can be a dry cough. It can be, it's just different, like you wouldn't really worry about it. But then very quickly, it becomes a problem because you're not getting enough oxygen, because that's one of the things that it does. And of course, there's a lot of information out there saying the 5G, which we won't go into all that, but 5G, EMF, Wi-Fi, et cetera, enhances and helps your viruses and your parasites grow and do more damage to you. That's the biggest thing. And so I believe it's a combination. I don't think it's just 5G, although I know that they have the weapon and the technology to attack us just with sound that we don't hear, energy. If you've listened to me for years, you know that's a big thing. But if you're in a 5G, you got your Wi-Fi, everything going, everything is enhanced. And the heavy metals that we're taking from the chemtrails, from our food, they also feed off of that, the parasites, et cetera. So it just becomes a big mushroom problem. Yes, ma'am. Okay, so someone in our audience is saying that if you're using the oximeter, if you have cold hands or fingernail polish, you won't get a good proper reading. Which brings me to the thing, we live in a day that I'm just going to suggest to you that you don't have your nails done. Number one, get your nails short, because a lot of the bacteria and viruses can be carried up underneath the fingernails. And we won't even talk about other issues with that. But right now, it's really not worth the problem. So yeah, I'd be keeping my nails short, and I would not be doing nail polish, especially on my fingernails. Okay, so we're about an hour past here. So we're just going to go in, and then of course with the local audience, we'll go into detail questions and things. But right now, we're just going to go through the essential oils that we would primarily use or want to make sure we had on hand. Before I do that, I wanted to show you a couple of resources. You can either buy them from us when you place an order, or you can go online. But this book here, called The Complete Book of Essential Aromatherapy, is a book that is not by a particular essential oil company. It's got like 600 plus recipes. It's from a professional clinical aromatherapist. She's known worldwide. You could also get this little pocket guide here. It's called the Essential Aromatherapy Pocket Guide. And then we have a particular one that's called Aromatherapy for the Healthy Child. Okay. So those are good resources. You just have a few good resources. Hopefully we will get to training classes on what to look for, because there's so much information here. But the first thing you want to do is, if you're going to go in and you're going to buy an essential oil somewhere, make sure, number one, it's in a glass bottle. Preferably, we prefer cobalt blue, but at least brown. And make sure the company has the botanical name on it. And if they can, I don't know many that do, unless they're artisans or clinical trained aromatherapists, it really makes a difference as to whether or not what country it's from also. But I don't know many that do that. Not specific. And the big companies, we won't even go there. They have their own issues. So we're going to just talk about, we have what we call a basic first aid kit. And so there's quite a few oils in there that it comes in a 16-hole thing. There's 10 oils plus a few other items. You can go to pureshimmin.com or remnantremedy.com and go to Pure Shimmin. Shimmin is oil in Hebrew. So I'm just going to go through these real quick, and then maybe spend a little bit more time so when we go to anoint our little baby, as our little sample here. Okay, so the first oil that's in this kit kit is what we call Aleph Care. And Aleph is the first Hebrew letter. We used to call it first aid or, first aid care or whatever, but because we have a Hebrew biblical mindset, we named it that, and also to keep out of problems with branding names, etc. That is what we would use primarily for a cut or a wound. For me and my family, predominantly, that's our stitches in a bottle. And one of the main reasons is because it does have Helichrysum Metallicum in it. And again, if you go to livingstonestabernacle.org, you will find an article on that to explain that more in detail. AMJ is for arthritis, muscle, and joint pain. That is we have several pain formulas, but that's our number one pain formula. Both Aleph Care and AMJ can be used for fungus or fungal infections. There are I forget how many, I think there's actually thousands of different kinds of fungus or fungi. And so certain oils do better on others. But we do have people who use that on themselves and or their animals, like their dogs. Or if you're going to have oils around cats or birds, you need to be super, super careful. Do your research, know what you're doing, because they can easily be killed with essential oils. When you're dealing with children and animals, and you're going to use essential oils, the first thing you want to do, besides learning exactly what you can and can't use on the animal, is you're going to want to open that bottle. Let me find one that's open. And you're going to pop the lid, and you're going to offer it, but you're not going to go up and force it up underneath their nose. When I do the Aroma Prayers Spa, and I had someone who came with a service dog, you could watch that dog just keep moving out the room farther and farther. Children and animals will come towards what they like or want or need, and they will repel. And some children in some conditions, say epilepsy, seizures, etc., cerebral palsy, different things. And you don't know today what kind of medications people are on. Over 95% of people are on some kind of prescribed medication. You don't know what they're on, and you could just give one oil up next to them, force it upon them, and you might have an issue. It's rare, but it does happen. It's kind of like the vaccination argument. Do you want to be the one that has that problem? From a biblical Torah perspective of aromatherapy training, when you get deeper into this, we don't just look at what oils are good to fight virus or bacteria or whatever. We would look at what specifically do you need. And so we would do aroma response therapy. And part of that, very simply, is how much does that person like that oil? If the oil is repugnant to you, you shouldn't use it. However, if I have a burn, if I am bleeding, I don't really care what Helichrysum Metallicum smells like. I just want it on there to stop it right away. If you don't have Helichrysum Metallicum, we discount it big time because we want people to be able to have it. It's a very expensive oil. Get you some cayenne, which by the way, I forgot about that one. Let me go back to this. Get you some cayenne tincture or some cayenne pepper. You can also use it to throw on a cut to stop burning. Okay? Also, a pinch of it, however much you can. There's so many things you can do with cayenne for heart. I've used it in the past to try to prevent heart attacks when they thought I had heart problems, because what it does is dilates the vessels and it improves circulation. So if you can get just a pinch of this, as much as you can tolerate, or whoever you're serving it to, in back with your echinacea, your golden seal, your mullein tea, your whatever, or even if you're just, they're so sick and all they're getting is broth, put a little bit of this. Also, that's real important. What they're saying about this particular outbreak is because of the way this virus works, you don't want to be drinking cold water. You want warm liquids, because they say around 78 to 80 degrees, this virus doesn't like to live in that higher heat. So you want to keep the body warm. You can put ginger and your your cayenne pepper in there. There's different you know, I like Crystal sauce, which is a cayenne. There's different brands out there, but that's a liquid that you just keep in the fridge. Some people keep it on their tables, but that's something that's easy also, is just to put that vinegar in there. That vinegar is usually in a medium of vinegar with the pepper to warm that. Okay, so the main things that people would use for flus and colds is our product called Breathe Free. And here's just a big bottle that we pour from, Breathe Free. And some people like to have a mixture or a backup of a different kind, or they just prefer different oils for breathing. We also have one called Resp Remedy, but the main one is Breathe Free. The other ones, and this is in the kit, is Spice Defense. We have 3 spice varieties. We have Spice Defense, Spice Thieves, and Spice Thieves plus oregano. What is the difference? If you're used to the MLM version of Thieves, you would be looking at our Spice Thieves. However, they have a proprietary blend, and there's actually other things in there that none of us ever know. But the main oils that they do list is in our Spice Thieves. I prefer to use that one for cleaning, for spraying around. But because I really want the addition of the oregano, I rarely use it, because I would use the Spice Thieves plus oregano instead for also cleaning and spraying. Also for diffusing. When I travel, we also now have, and we have put them in nasal inhalers. So we have a nasal inhaler with the Breathe Free. We have one with the Spice Thieves plus oregano. I would alternate these when I was traveling on the airplane. And I also would be spraying it. The Spice Thieves plus oregano is in a hydrosol, and we just spray it around. When I get up in the mornings before I go out, this is what I do before I go outside. And this is what I usually have on when everyone comes up to me and says, "Oh, you smell so good." Because it's this. But I wear it simply because it's not just because it smells good, but because it is antiviral, antibacterial. We use it to spray down our linens and our beds, especially if we're traveling, going to a hotel room. I've had people that can actually start bringing out bed bugs and can see them. I have other people who use it on their dogs to watch fleas drop off. So, but it's something that, if I had to, I could spray it in my mouth. I'd rather mix it with an essential oil, a carrier oil, but if I had to and I was desperate, I wouldn't do it very often, but I would spray it in my mouth if I was traveling and didn't have access to coconut oil or something. So I would override what I said if that's all I had. But I wouldn't do it too much, because then your skin's going to kind of start peeling. It's going to be very volatile. So we also have Purify. Purify has tea tree in it, lavender, and some other things, citronella, etc. I use the Purify. I keep it in a bigger bottle like this. I have a little flap on it like this. So every time I wash my clothes, and this is one thing you're going to be careful, as this outbreak gets worse and worse. Remember, once you leave your home, you can have it on you anywhere and on your clothes. They say it can live on metal up to 12 hours. So if I know I have friends who have lived with mold, and it literally just knocks them out, like nothing that bothered any of us. But they would literally have to, as soon as they before they got in the house, they took the clothes off, they took everything out, put them in bags. They had to bring them in, process them, and use them in a way that they have to remove all that mold. Okay, they have to live like this until they get well enough. So I put this in my wash. So as soon as I would come in, I'd take off whatever I was wearing outside, separately, put it in the wash. I put a few drops of this in my wash. When I take it out, I put it on wool balls or little linen or dryer sheets and put it in there. If I want to, especially when your people are sick, when your blankets or your pillows, your goose down comforters, things that you don't really want to wash, put this on the balls or maybe on the corners of those, and then put them in the dryer. And just stand there, because if you walk away, you might shrink the snot out of them. But put them in there, because now what you're doing is you're giving it some heat, and you're given the essential oils for the antibacterial, viral, etc., then you can take them out. And especially when you have sick people, I like to do that at least once a month in the household. But especially if you have sick people going up, this is something you're going to want to do on a regular basis. Just to put in there for a few minutes and bring the heat up for whatever that fabric can tolerate, and put that in there. You could do it with Spice Thieves too. We just usually use that one. So cypress I talked about. So Breathe Free and or cypress. Cypress is going to help fluid move. It's like the lymphatic. So you could use just it with the mullein. So I'm going to be fighting the mullein on the inside for the fluids, and then I'd put the cypress on the outside, or I would use the Breathe Free. I would, again, put a few drops in with my carrier oil. And then you just take it, you dip it in there. Again, watch the video. I go into detail with this. And I would just start massaging around the ears. I do the same thing with the Spice Defense, or Spice Thieves plus oregano, and you're massaging, okay? But you gotta be very, very careful when you're dealing with yourself or with children, elderly, that they're not gonna touch that and then put it in their eyes or mouth, etc., okay? It's usually why I like to do it when people are laying down and getting ready to go to sleep, or they're so sick they're in bed and sleeping. We wrap them. I put towels up underneath them when I'm anointing them from head to toe with the carrier oil. Do a patch area. Make sure you have enough carrier oil first, because these oils could burn them. Some people are more sensitive than others. If you're dealing with children, and that's, again, go to the video that I told you about colds, flus, etc., because I go through the whole detail. But what I didn't go into that one is the children. If you've got I'd say someone 2 and under, you are going to want your essential oil at 1%. Okay, so that means that's an average. You can maybe a little bit, but you're going to want 1%, 1 to 5% max with carrier oil. And you can do the bottoms of their feet. You know, you can do the back of their neck, their back. But I would test and start with the feet first. This is how we usually have brought down the temperature and or fought the antibacterial. Okay, but usually with infants, the best thing you can do, if you can, is you need to be nursing that baby. And then whatever you do to yourself, that baby's going to be benefiting from that, okay? But let's say this was a bigger person, not a baby. Again, you're going to be doing the temples. If you can, do the back of the neck. You want to do all the groin area. It's not the groin, the lymphatic, where the lymph nodes are, okay? On an adult or an older person, you want to come down the sides right here. That's where the groin area is, where the lymphatic is. There's a lymphatic drainage that comes all the way up and down inside here. So you don't want to get around the personal area, but you would want to come up and come around like this and do the front and the back if you can. On a baby, again, I would probably usually just stop with the feet and maybe back behind here, and make sure you have at least 95 to 99% carrier oil to your 1% essential oil. Okay, because they're very sensitive and we don't want to overload them. If you are going to use oregano oil, remember oregano oil is a natural antibiotic, very powerful. If you're using it more than 3 or 4 days, you need to start replenishing your probiotics, just like you would if you were going to take an antibiotic, okay? And again, I really encourage you to do the video, colds, flus, respiratory and mold, how to anoint a loved one, because I go into detail on the last half of that video on how to anoint someone and what to use. And the reason I use Spice Defense for the anointing is this reason. The oils that are in there, it's a mixture, it's a synergy. Synergy is not a new age word. It means things are working together like they're supposed to. And just like the body of Messiah is supposed to be, we're supposed to be stronger when we're working together. And so when we put the oils that we put in there, we have oils, some have heavier molecules than others. Some are for fever, some are for bacteria, some are for viral. And the heavier oils, say like myrrh, goes into the body more slowly, but stays in the body longer and is a fixative for the other oils. So our Spice Defense has a myrrh in it. It has some heavier oils in it. So your peppermint oils, your light oils, and you can tell your light oils. This is just a principle. If I open the bottle here and you can smell it across the room, it is a very light oil. It's got a lot of phenols in it. You don't have to really know all that science. You just know it's very volatile. It's got a very light oil. That means it's going to go in really quick through the body and out. Your heavy oils, the ones that are thick, the molecules are thicker. They're heavier in other chemical properties. They're going to go into the body slower, but they're going to be working longer into the body, okay? So that is the reason why I would use Spice Defense for personal application, and or ultrasonic diffuser or whatever. But I would use the lighter oils in my spray bottles and my cleaning, but it's not that you couldn't use spice leaves and oregano and all like you would. That's just the reason why I would. And when that's what I use when people are really sick and they've got fevers, etc., sore throats. And then we talked about the oregano. We talked about the peppermint. I also have a video out there called where I basically go over the first aid kit in more detail. Relief and Rescue, that's again for pain. More pain that is bone related because it has oils in it that resonate more with the bone. And then we talked about the FCO. So I think pretty much that's an overview. And so if I was off the top of my head just going to get things, I would try to get echinacea. I tried to have mullein. I would have Spice Defense. I would have Spice Leaves plus oregano if I could have it, and I would have Breathe Free. Those are probably my main big stays, although there's all kinds of other things to do, but it's a lot of information for one thing. You have any questions?
What about elderberry?
I'm not a big elderberry user. I used to wildcraft it. I used to make my own syrups with it when I lived in Montana because I had access to do that. But there was a period, but I never used it because I just found echinacea and golden seal always work so well. I know that elderberry is a really big thing right now, but also during the late 90s, early 2000s, it came out, and I cannot recall exactly what it was, but there was a certain kind of, I don't know, sickness or virus or something. Something went out about elderberry not being something you wanted to take once you got sick or once you had a fever. I don't remember the details, but I remember in my mind, I just took it off the list. It was something that I was going to use as a cough syrup. I'd put it in my pancakes. I might make a tea with it, but it just in my chest, it was a side thing because I didn't want to have to worry about another thing to worry about how and when to use it. Does that make sense? Yes. But maybe they've discovered something different. I mean, that's kind of like they found that there's certain it's like Tylenol and certain things like that are really bad at a certain place or time if you mix them with certain things. So I'm not saying it's bad, and I'm not saying you shouldn't have it. I'm just saying I would think more of it as a preventive. Okay. But you'd really have to do your research because that's just where I put it in my category in my brain.
Okay, good.
So, is there anything else? All right, well, thank you. And hopefully in the future, we'll have more detailed information step by step. But we were just trying to get this information out fast so that if you can get these things now before you can't access them later if things continue the way they're going. May your garments always be white and may your head lack no shemen. Shalom.